I gave them everything, my money, my time, my peace, and they used it to steal from me, plotting our downfall like it was all part of their plan. It all started with Tessa, my son Joe's fiancée. She walked into our lives with her sweet, honey-coated voice, but I should have known then that underneath it was poison. That marriage budget she kept talking about, it wasn't just about flowers and fancy catering. It was about us, my life, James's life, everything we'd worked for. And as it turns out, it was about setting us up for the fall. You'd think I was just a naive woman, just a retired school secretary who never saw it coming. But you don't understand. When your son's fiancée is plotting behind your back, you wake up fast. To understand how a quiet, unsuspecting woman like me went from minding her own business to secretly recording her future daughter-in-law, you need to know how everything started. How a mother's love for her son blinded her to the truth until it all came crashing down. James and I lived simple, steady lives. Never rich, never poor. He worked in city maintenance, and I was a secretary at the local elementary school for over 20 years. We had 2 ordinary paychecks, nothing fancy, but it was enough to keep our house standing, food on the table, and a little saved for our future. Now that we're retired, it's quieter. We've got a small house in the suburbs. Our 2 pensions bring in a little over $5,000 a month. The mortgage is long paid off, and we spent our days in a peaceful routine. Grocery shopping, cooking dinner, tending to the garden, visiting old friends. A simple, good life. But when Tessa entered the picture, things started to change. She came around, always sweet, always polite, but the moment she stepped into our world, something shifted. The quiet I had fought for, the peace I had earned, started to feel threatened, and I ignored it for a while. Maybe too long. Then came that moment, the moment I overheard her talking to her mother about the wedding budget. And the truth hit me like a freight train. This wasn't about a wedding. This was about me, about James, about everything we'd worked for. I never thought I'd be the type of woman to secretly record her own family. But when I heard those words, I knew I had no choice. Tessa and her plans? They were going to take everything we had, our savings, our peace, and my son's future. And that was when I knew I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Now that we're retired, things are quieter. We live in an old house in the suburbs. Between our 2 pensions, we bring in a little over $5,000 a month. The mortgage is long paid off, and life rolls on in a simple rhythm. Grocery runs, cooking dinner together, tending the garden, visits with old friends. Nothing fancy, but it was peaceful. It was everything we ever wanted. Sometimes James would plant roses in the backyard. I'd be in the kitchen, brewing coffee by the window. I'd look up and see those soft blooms swaying in the light, a reminder of how calm and tender life had become. The only thing that kept us up at night was our son, Joe. But that was before Tessa showed up, before I realized that peace. It was about to be shattered, and that budget she kept talking about. It wasn't just about throwing a lavish wedding. It was about everything we had, everything we were, being torn apart. One afternoon, I found myself quietly recording her and her mother's conversation. I couldn't help it. The words cut through me like a knife. They weren't just planning a wedding. They were planning our downfall. I had tried to ignore the warning signs, tried to believe that the woman Joe had picked would be good for him. But when I overheard that conversation, something inside me broke. I wasn't going to stand by and let them tear down everything we'd worked for. And that's when I made my move. From that night on, Tessa became a regular fixture in our home. Weekends mostly. She never came empty-handed. Sometimes it was a box of artisanal cookies, sometimes a bag of imported fruit, once even a bottle of vintage wine that must have cost a fortune. She always seemed to pick just the thing I'd mentioned in passing. "Mrs. Dawson, this is the brand of organic tea you said you liked last time. I had to go to 3 different specialty stores to find them." "Mr. Dawson, I heard this single malt scotch has a lovely peaty finish. You absolutely must give it a try." She smiled sweetly, spoke politely. At first, I was genuinely touched. She seemed thoughtful, considerate, like she truly wanted to be part of our family. She was especially warm toward me. When we went grocery shopping, she'd hook her arm through mine. "Are your shoulders a little stiff lately, Mrs. Dawson?" She'd coo at the corner coffee shop, giving me an unsolicited shoulder massage. "You've got to take care of yourself. You're not getting any younger, you know. We need you around for a long, long time." Her tone was more tender than my own sister's. But over time, something didn't sit right. Her affection always seemed tied to money, gifts, favors, or little comments that were just a bit too pointed. Like the time we passed a storefront with a cashmere coat in the window. Over $800 easily. She sighed dramatically. "That color would look stunning on you, Mrs. Dawson. After Joe and I get married, I'm definitely buying you that coat. Or perhaps," she'd add with a sly wink, "you could treat yourself. You deserve it." Or when a neighbor pulled into their driveway with a brand new luxury sedan, she glanced over and said, "Joe's coworker Sarah is so lucky. Her parents gifted her a brand new SUV for her engagement. Isn't that the sweetest? They even helped with the down payment on her condo." She loved sharing stories about other people's weddings, always emphasizing the financial contributions of the groom's family. "My cousin Jennifer just got married," she'd say, eyes sparkling. "The groom's family bought them a beautiful townhome downtown, paid in full. They even threw in a brand new Audi SUV as a wedding present. And my college roommate, she married into good money. Her mother-in-law gave her custom diamond jewelry as a welcome gift, and they held the wedding at a 5-star beachside estate. Can you imagine?" She'd say it all with a cheerful voice and a sunny smile. But her eyes, those eyes held an unmistakable kind of longing. Not envy, not admiration, expectation. She wasn't just reminiscing. She was planting seeds, dropping hints, laying out a blueprint. Like she was saying, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, please review these examples before submitting your final offer." Ever since that conversation about the Stonebridge condo, Tessa's visits didn't let up. But something in the air had shifted. She still smiled, still brought little gifts, but the warmth felt curated, rehearsed. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began steering our conversations in a new direction, toward her parents. She started sharing stories about her upbringing in vivid, emotional detail. "My parents really had it rough," she'd say, eyes misting up, "especially my dad. He started working in an auto shop when he was 18. His hands are covered in calluses. He never fixed his own teeth, always putting my schooling first. And my mom, she's been sick most of her life, on medication, in and out of hospitals. My dad had to be both father and mother, and he never once complained." The moment that really shook me came on James's birthday. Joe brought her over for dinner. We'd prepared a full spread, roast chicken, all the sides, even a homemade cake. The atmosphere was warm, relaxed. Midway through the meal, Tessa raised her glass and smiled sweetly. "Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Dawson," she said, her voice like butter. "Happy birthday, Mr. Dawson. Wishing you health and happiness. You've both worked so hard, and your retirement income is so generous. It's wonderful you're so comfortable. Hopefully, when it makes sense, you might be able to help Joe and me get our little household started, and maybe even lend a hand with my parents too. They've done so much for me. I just can't leave them behind. It would mean the world to us, and to them." She said it like a joke, her voice light, her expression soft, but her eyes were watching us closely, gauging our reactions. James chuckled faintly, lifting his wine glass, but I saw his hand pause just a split second mid-air. Joe stared down at his plate, silent. He knew what she said wasn't right, but he didn't have the guts to say so. Inside, I felt a jolt, like someone had knocked my heart off its rhythm. It's a beautiful thing when a child wants to care for their parents, but expecting your future in-laws to foot the bill and wrapping it in sugar like it's no big deal, that's not devotion, that's emotional extortion. I bit my tongue. It was James's birthday, and I didn't want to ruin the night, but my heart, it dropped like a stone. Back when she insisted on a downtown condo, I thought she had expensive taste. But now I was starting to see something else. This wasn't about taste, it was about strategy. A strategy that seemed to involve draining us dry. And sure enough, just a few days later, they came over again. Dinner ended, and Tessa lounged on the couch, sipping tea. She pulled out her phone and let out a dramatic sigh. "Ugh, commuting is killing me," she announced. "The office is so far, and with the subway and bus transfers, it's just too much. And I've got to look presentable for morning meetings, makeup, hair, it's exhausting." Trying to make small talk, I nodded. "Yeah, the commute can be rough." She jumped on that. "Exactly. That's why I told Joe, we'll need a second car once we're married. Something roomy, maybe a crossover SUV. It'll make work easier, weekend trips more fun, and when we have kids, it'll be perfect for school pickups." Joe walked in holding Tessa's hand, followed by her parents. Her mother, a woman named Brenda, was dressed in a deep purple dress, a shade too bright and perhaps a size too small. Her hair was teased into a voluminous cloud. She smiled warmly, but her eyes were sharp, scanning everything, calculating. Her father, Frank, trailed a step behind, quiet, hunched in a faded windbreaker, fiddling with an unlit cigarette between his fingers. He nodded once in greeting, barely meeting our eyes. We sat down. The server came by, brought menus and water. Barely a few pleasantries had passed when Tessa's mother jumped right in, her voice bright and cheerful, but with an edge that was anything but casual. "Oh, Tessa has always been such a good girl," Brenda gushed, beaming at her daughter. "Smart, hardworking, never gave us a moment's trouble. She's doing great at work. Her boss just loves her. Honestly, she's had no shortage of suitors over the years, men with very good prospects, but she only had eyes for your Joe. That's fate, isn't it?" James and I managed polite smiles, nodding along, but the tone was clear. This wasn't flattery, it was the prelude to an invoice. Sure enough, her voice shifted, softened with sudden nostalgia. "We don't come from much, you know. I work the register at a grocery store, on my feet 12 hours a day sometimes. Her father, Frank here, used to work in a warehouse, moving heavy shipments until his back gave out a few years ago. We scrimped and saved every penny to get Tessa through college. She never lacked a thing, we made sure of it." She dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue, though I didn't see any actual tears. "All we want," she continued, her voice taking on a plaintive tone, "is for her life to get easier now. She's worked so hard. She deserves to breathe a little, to have an easier future. And, well, we're not getting any younger ourselves." She said easier twice. It sounded like a blessing, but it landed like a billing statement. That's when her husband, Frank, spoke up, coughing a few times before chiming in at just the right moment. "We're not asking for much," he said, his voice raspy. "Don't need anything fancy. We just want them to be stable, you know. And for us, well, I've had a lot of health issues these past few years. Doctor's bills aren't cheap. And while we're not getting any younger, retirement planning is becoming more of a priority. We want to make sure we're not a burden, but you understand." He said it casually, even lightly, but every word hit like a slow-burning fuse. When he said retirement planning, he wasn't talking to his wife. He was looking straight at Joe, then his gaze flickered to James and me. It couldn't have been more obvious if he'd drawn it on a whiteboard. "You'll be responsible for us, too, through your son." James and I sat across from them, still smiling, still playing the part. But inside, I was boiling. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a presentation, a transaction, and we were the assumed investors. Tessa, meanwhile, played the part of the dutiful daughter to perfection, refilling her mother's water, passing her father extra servings with a gentle hand on his shoulder. She looked like the picture of filial grace, but I saw it, the little smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, the one she tried to hide, but couldn't quite suppress. It wasn't warmth, it was certainty, like she believed the deal was already done. That meal was a blur. The food was good, plenty of it, but I barely touched my plate. Everything tasted like dust. As soon as we pulled out of the parking lot, back in our own car, Tessa, who was riding with Joe, apparently went off. Joe told me later, his voice strained. "What was that?" she'd snapped, twisting in her seat to glare at him. "Your parents didn't say a single clear thing the whole time. My mom poured her heart out about our struggles, and they just sat there smiling like statues. What's that supposed to mean? Do they think they're too good for us, for my family?" Joe, flustered, had tried to calm her. "Tessa, come on. It's not like that. My parents just... they're careful." "Careful? Or cheap?" she'd cut in, her voice rising, sharp as a knife. "They won't commit to helping with a decent place downtown. They keep delaying any talk about the car. And now they can't even acknowledge my parents' needs for their retirement. Joe, are you serious about marrying me or not? Because this half-hearted support isn't going to cut it. My parents sacrificed everything for me, and I expect my husband and his family to respect that and step up." The air inside their car, Joe said, had turned thick with her fury. And in that moment, for him, it was no longer about a condo or a car, or who paid for what. It was about control. And Joe, poor Joe, he looked like a man standing in the middle of a storm, trying to convince himself it was just a passing breeze. After that disastrous dinner, Tessa's emotional pressure campaign kicked into overdrive. Day by day, it grew more intense, more relentless. She began feeding Joe a steady stream of guilt-laced values, wrapping her demands in the language of duty and devotion. "Taking care of my parents is our responsibility, Joe," she told him, her voice earnest, her eyes wide with sincerity. "They worked their whole lives. They sacrificed everything for me. You're going to be like a son to them now. You can't turn your back on family. It's just not right." It didn't stop there. She started naming numbers. "I've been thinking," she said one evening, all calm calculation behind a soft smile, as Joe relayed to me later, his own voice hollow. $3,000 a month for my parents is fair. Groceries, medicine, bills, a little something for them to enjoy their later years. It all adds up, and with prices climbing every year, we can always adjust later. It's a baseline." Joe didn't say much when she first said it, but something shifted in him after that. His mood dimmed. The light that used to live behind his eyes, the easy grin, the spark in his voice, it was flickering out. Now he walked around with a permanent furrow between his brows. At meals, he barely spoke, pushing his food around his plate like he didn't even taste it. And when he looked at James and me, it was always with hesitation, like he was holding something back, something he was ashamed or afraid to say. We saw it happening, saw our son, the same boy who used to light up every room, being dragged deeper and deeper into emotional quicksand, slowly suffocating under someone else's definition of love and obligation. It broke my heart. This wasn't just a woman with expectations. This was manipulation. Piece by piece, she was reshaping him, redefining love as sacrifice, convincing him that caring meant paying, and paying meant proving himself. And I knew we couldn't just sit and watch anymore. Some lessons you can't teach with words. Some truths have to be seen to be believed. It was time to find the truth, lay it bare, let Joe see for himself. Was Tessa really building a future with him, or was she simply securing a future from him, and by extension, from us? I didn't want to tear them apart, but I wasn't about to let my son become someone else's open wallet, smiling through a lifetime of quiet regret. So I made up my mind. I was going to get proof. Not for me, not for James. For Joe. So that when the truth finally knocked, he'd have no choice but to open the door. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with a bang. It tiptoes in on an ordinary afternoon, tucked inside the quiet moments you'd least expect. It was a calm Saturday, the kind with birdsong and sun filtering gently through the curtains. Joe had stepped out briefly to pick up some documents from the bank. Tessa stayed behind, curled up on the couch watching TV. I was out on the balcony tending to my roses when I heard her voice. Low, cautious, like she didn't want to be overheard. But the balcony door was ajar and the living room wasn't far. She was on the phone with her mother. I froze, watering can still in hand, and instinctively reached for my phone, quietly tapping the record button. Her tone was slick with satisfaction, laced with just enough irritation to feel real. "Mom, stop rushing me. Everything's moving along," she said, loud enough for me to catch clearly. "I already looked into their finances. His parents pull in several grand a month from their pensions. House is fully paid off. No debt. Joe, you know how he is. Soft-hearted, easy to handle. I just need to pout a little, and he folds. The house and the car are coming along. I'll get him to bring it up with his parents in his own time. And you and Dad, stop worrying about your retirement. We'll get it sorted once we're married, and I have a clearer picture of their long-term assets. It's all part of our marriage budget, after all. We just need to make sure their wills are updated in our favor before, well, you know." A soft, chilling laugh followed. Then her tone shifted. "Crap, his mum's on the balcony. I gotta go. I'll call you back." The moment she hung up, the TV blared with a fast food commercial, drowning out the room in artificial noise. But her words still rang clear in my ears, sharp as broken glass. The sun kept shining, but I felt nothing. My hands were cold. My breath caught somewhere beneath my ribs. She wasn't here to build a life with my son. She was here to manage one, to manage us. Every detail choreographed, every word calculated. Her marriage budget included our assets, our future, even, it seemed, the financial benefits of us not being around. I stood there for what felt like forever, watching water overflow from the flower pot until the soil turned dark and heavy. Then slowly I returned inside. I smiled at her, asked if she wanted tea, like nothing had happened, because it wasn't time. Not yet. I needed something more. Not just words Joe might dismiss as, "you misheard," or "you misunderstood." I needed something he couldn't look away from, something undeniable. And, as if on cue, she gave it to me. Over the next few days, she ramped everything up. She started dragging Joe to more open houses, in high-end downtown developments, making test drive appointments at luxury car dealerships. Every time they came back, she'd gush about smart home features and buttery leather seats, about child-friendly communities and advanced climate control systems, as if laying out the blueprint for a life we were expected to co-finance. Then came the final act. One evening, she arrived with a sleek file folder in hand and a business-like air. She sat in the center of the sofa, legs crossed, expression serene, and placed the folder carefully on the coffee table like she was about to present a boardroom strategy. "Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, Joe," she began, her voice composed, her face glowing with practiced poise. "This isn't a demand. It's just a set of suggestions. Some early-stage planning to avoid miscommunications or financial pressure down the line. I've put together a sort of post-marriage financial and lifestyle proposal for us all to consider." I felt my stomach drop. James's brow furrowed so sharply, I thought it might never smooth out again. Joe looked apprehensive. Tessa opened the folder. "The first page," she announced, "is the housing plan." She proposed we assist with the down payment for a condo in that new luxury development downtown. "We'll take out the mortgage jointly under both our names, Joe's and mine," she explained smoothly. "But early support from you for a substantial down payment would really ease the burden. It's just more secure for our future when the title includes both of us from the start." Page 2. Vehicle acquisition. She recommended purchasing a new SUV, the $50,000 one, before the wedding, specifically titled in her name. "It'll help with the financing since I can get an employee discount through my company's insurance partner," she said with a bright smile. "Saves money overall, and it's better for my credit building." I nearly laughed but didn't. Page 3. Monthly household budget. She outlined, "Joe's salary will be allocated 80% to a shared joint account, which I'll manage primarily. I track expenses really closely, so I think this will make our spending more efficient and help us save for our bigger goals." Then came page 4, parental support proposal. "My parents don't have retirement benefits," she stated as if reading from a script. "Their employment was always irregular, so we've agreed Joe and I, to offer them a living stipend of around $3,000 per month, as discussed. Joe and I will share the cost, but any assistance from you two towards this would mean a lot and show true family unity. And finally, a section labeled Additional Considerations for Long-Term Security. This was where the ice in my veins truly formed. Given future expenses like childcare, healthcare, and education for our children, we suggest you consider establishing a family trust with Joe and me as primary beneficiaries and eventual trustees, or, at the very least, updating your current beneficiary designations on pensions, life insurance, and your will to reflect our new family unit. It's just a gesture of long-term support and shared security, ensuring a smooth transition of assets when the time comes. Each sentence was polite, the tone was warm, but the substance was coldly transactional. Every line mapped to a dollar sign, to our assets, to our future, and implicitly, to our end. I closed the folder, my hands slick with sweat. This wasn't a financial plan. This was a takeover strategy, a carefully veiled contract to convert affection into funding, in-laws into sponsors, and marriage into a merger where we were the primary and ultimately expendable assets. I looked up. Joe's face was ashen. He was staring at the pages like they might catch fire in his hands. His fingers dug into the folder's edge, knuckles turning white, as if he didn't know whether to tear it apart or throw it across the room. The room fell into a silence so deep even the TV couldn't break it. A reality show chirped on in the background, voices laughing, cheering, celebrating shallow triumphs, while our own house sat in a frozen, breathless pause. And I knew this was it. The curtain had finally lifted. The final act had begun. Tessa, on the other hand, didn't look the least bit flustered. She let out a soft laugh, light, almost affectionate. "Joe, don't let the structure scare you," she said. "I know this kind of thing might feel a little intense, especially for your parents, but it's not about demands. It's just responsible communication, so everyone knows what to expect." Then she turned to me, her voice smooth, her posture graceful, her smile delicately measured. "Mrs. Dawson, I have nothing but respect for you and your husband. I put this together not to start a conflict, but to avoid one. It's not about money, really. It's about peace of mind for all of us." Joe looked from her to me, his lips parting. "Mom," he said, voice low and hesitant, I know this doesn't feel great, but Tessa is a good person. She really is. She's a little too direct sometimes, that's all. We just want a stable life. I know you and Dad are worried, but I need you to trust me on this. I want to be with her. I need you to support me." Support. That word landed like a pin to the chest. Support. Like we hadn't been doing exactly that every single day of his life. I picked up the folder, closed it gently, and slid it back across the table toward him. My voice was calm. Too calm. "Joe," I said, my voice flat, final. "If that's what you've decided, then go ahead. Try it. You want to marry her, we won't stop you. But from this point on, you'll need to learn how to take responsibility for your choices, and for their consequences." He froze, eyes wide. He hadn't expected that. Maybe he'd expected another argument, maybe tears, but not this. He opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came. I stood, gathered the teacups from the table, and walked toward the kitchen. "You don't need to stay for dinner," I said without turning. "We didn't plan for guests, and frankly, we're not in the mood to host." Tessa's expression faltered, just for a second, a flicker of surprise, maybe even anger, before her composure returned. Still, she stood up and slipped her arm through Joe's. "Let's go, honey," she said, her voice a little tight. The door closed behind them with a muted click, and then it was just James and me, sitting in the silence they left behind. After that night, the house grew quieter than ever. James still spent his mornings trimming branches out in the backyard. I kept busy cooking, cleaning, folding laundry, but we never brought up Joe. We never mentioned Tessa. It was like the warmth had been swept out of the rooms. replaced by a fine layer of invisible dust. Without saying it out loud, we reached a silent agreement. No interference, no compromise. Joe texted from time to time, short messages like, "How are you?" or "Hope your back's better." I answered with slow, one-word replies. "Fine." "Okay." No follow-ups, no questions. I didn't ask how he was doing. I didn't ask if he'd changed his mind. No fights, no drama, just a quiet, steady pulling away. He stopped by once or twice, picking up some things he'd left behind, like he was trying to hold on to something without naming it. I heated up a bowl of soup for him, but didn't say much. He stayed only a short while. He didn't mention Tessa, not even once, but I could see the storm behind his eyes. He was unraveling, caught between the loyalty he wanted to give and the truth he didn't want to face. And I wasn't idle. That phone call I overheard from the balcony, I had recorded it quietly, cleanly. I also started doing a little digging. It wasn't hard to find Tessa's more private social media, the kind not meant for prospective in-laws. One evening, while scrolling, a post from one of her close friends popped up, tagging Tessa in a photo at a champagne brunch. The caption, celebrating T's brilliant merger and acquisition strategy, and our future millionaire. The comments made my stomach turn. "Another sugar daddy, huh? Or is this one the whole family trust fund?" one read. Tessa's reply, complete with a winking emoji. "Light work, flatter them right, wrap it up tight. They'll be signing over the estate before they know what hit 'em." My hands were trembling. I reached out to an old friend, Kathy, whose daughter, Lindsay, was interning at a law firm that Tessa had apparently consulted for premarital asset planning. What Lindsay told Kathy, and Kathy relayed to me, sealed it. "Ellie," Kathy said, her voice grave, "Lindsay said this Tessa talks like your son is some stepping stone. She was asking very specific questions about how to structure things to ensure she'd be the primary beneficiary if anything happened to you or James, even before Joe. She even asked about contesting wills and the easiest way to get power of attorney over an elderly person's finances. Said she wanted to start planning her in-laws' estate strategy early to avoid probate issues. She'd never mentioned any of this to Joe, but when it came to our home, our pension, our life savings, our very lives, it seemed, she wasn't the least bit shy. I collected it all. The recording of her phone call, screenshots of her social media, Kathy's and Lindsay's carefully anonymized statements, and saved them onto a USB drive. I didn't rush to show him. I waited for him to be ready, waited for the words, "I see it now." But those words never came. Until one evening, I realized I couldn't wait anymore. I invited him over for dinner. He showed up with a frozen pizza in a crinkled grocery bag, clearly bought on the way, more out of guilt than thought. I didn't scold him, just told him to sit. I heated up a bowl of corn chowder instead, his childhood favorite. He took a sip, then murmured, "Still the best. No one makes it like you." I nodded. "You used to ask for it every time you had a cold." We sat there for a moment, quiet. Then I stood and walked to the drawer, pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was the USB drive and a few old photos. Joe as a boy, wheezing from asthma, James carrying him on his back, me sitting in a hospital hallway, blurry, wrapped in a jacket I hadn't taken off in 2 days. I pressed play on a small speaker connected to my phone, which played the recording I'd made on the balcony. Tessa's voice filled the living room. "Joe, you know how he is. Soft-hearted, easy to handle. And you and Dad, stop worrying about your retirement. We'll get it sorted once we're married, and I have a clearer picture of their long-term assets. It's all part of our marriage budget, after all. We just need to make sure their wills are updated in our favor before, well, you know." Her smug, calculating, confident laugh echoed. I switched off the recording, then slid the box toward him, containing the USB with everything else. "I'm not here to fight you, Joe," I said quietly. "I just need you to see, to know who's actually standing in your corner." He didn't speak, His eyes darted from the speaker to the photos, then to the USB. His jaw tensed, his lips pressed into a hard line. And he couldn't meet my gaze. I stood and walked toward the kitchen. "When you've figured it out," I said without turning back, "come home for dinner. For real dinner." He didn't stay. He lingered by the doorway for a long time. Then finally, he left quietly, shutting the door behind him, taking the box with him. But I knew deep down the seed was planted. It was there now, buried in the soil of his doubt, waiting to be watered with silence, with absence, with the cold realization that love, real love, doesn't come with invoices or itemized expectations for your parents' demise. Another quiet Saturday afternoon. The house was still, the kind of stillness that lingers after too many unspoken words. I had just taken a tray of warm cookies out of the oven when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Joe standing there, backlit by the soft spring light. There was a tired look in his eyes, but also a new clarity, and a single grocery bag in hand. Fruit, milk, some slices of ham. "I was in the area," he said quietly. "Thought I'd stop by." I didn't ask why. Didn't need to. I just nodded and stepped aside. "There's some cantaloupe your dad sliced this morning. Go grab a few pieces." He stepped inside, moving slowly, like someone visiting a place they once knew by heart, but now saw with unfamiliar eyes. His gaze drifted across the living room. The bookshelf still held his high school math trophies. The same picture frame stood next to the sofa. The three of us camping in the national park, him on my shoulders, holding a leaf like a prize. I went to the kitchen to make tea. Through the window, I saw him standing in front of the old cherry tree in the backyard. Spring had only just begun to wake it, tiny buds reaching for light, shy and uncertain. "Mum," his voice came quietly, almost hesitant. "That time my asthma was really bad. You're the one who ran me to the ER, right?" I paused, then nodded, my hand stilling over the tea tray. "Yes. Your dad was out of town. No taxis would stop, so I wrapped you in a blanket and ran the whole way. I remember I was still in slippers. My feet were bleeding by the time we got there." He didn't look back at me. He just kept watching the tree, his voice barely above a whisper. "I remember not being able to breathe. I remember panicking, and your hand on my chest pressing, telling me to hold on. I think I buried it after a while, but it's still there. I just forgot how much you did." I didn't say anything, just poured the tea and set the pot on the table. Eventually he turned and sat on the couch. He dropped his head into his hands. "Mom," he said, his voice muffled by his palms, "have I been selfish? Blind?" I sat down beside him slowly. Instead of answering, I reached into the drawer and pulled out an old photo album. I opened it and handed it to him. There he was, 6 years old, wearing oversized overalls and grinning like the world had just told him he could keep it. There he was, covered in flour in the kitchen, his first attempt at baking. There we were, 3 of us on the couch after his college exams, eating pizza and watching dumb comedies until we cried, laughing. I placed the album gently in his lap. "Joe," I said softly, "we never expected anything in return. We just wanted you to be happy, to be safe. But you have to ask yourself, does the person next to you love you, or does she love what your father and I spent our whole lives building? Does she want your heart, or just access to our bank accounts and our will?" He didn't answer, just stared at the photos, his thumb brushing the edge of a memory that had grown soft with time. "Mom," he began again, his voice raw, "I really did. I thought I loved her. At the start, I thought she was just scared, insecure. I thought if I worked harder, gave more, if we gave more, she'd finally feel safe." I nodded slowly. "But she didn't, Joe. She just kept taking. And you started disappearing." A few days later, he called. His voice was quiet, steady. "Mom, Dad, can I come over tonight? I ended it with Tessa." When he arrived, he looked like a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side, singed but whole. He told us how he'd confronted her with the recordings, the social media posts, the information about her inquiries into their estate. She tried everything, he said, his voice weary but firm. Tears, pleading, promises to change. She cried about being misunderstood, claimed she never meant any harm, begged me to remember the good times. But I didn't flinch, Mum. Not once. I just looked her in the eye and said, "You're not worthy of everything my mother has done for me. For us. You don't want a husband, you want a windfall." Then her parents had stepped in. Gone was the polite, smiling couple from the restaurant. They called Joe directly. No pretense this time. Their tone was sharp, accusatory. "You have no sense of responsibility," her father had snapped. "You made a promise," her mother had added, her voice thick with implied threat. "Young couples fight, it's normal. But what really hurts is when you let the older generation down, after all we've sacrificed." They tried shame, tried pressure, tried guilt. But Joe, our Joe, didn't bend. For the first time, he didn't offer excuses. He didn't try to make it easier for anyone. He simply ended the call and blocked their numbers without hesitation. The boy who once second-guessed every decision, who shrank himself to keep others comfortable, was gone. In his place stood a man who had seen the truth and chosen to stand in it. Later that evening, he came home. Not to pick up things, not to keep the peace, but to be home. He walked into the living room and pulled out the old photo album, the one he hadn't dared to look at in years. He sat on the couch and turned its pages slowly, over and over again. Not rushing, not crying, just remembering. Pictures of scraped knees and crooked grins, birthday cakes lopsided with love, camping trips and late-night pizza, tiny moments that built a life. Finally, he looked up, his eyes soft but clear. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I just want to be myself again. I'm so sorry."